I see.
The compiler doesn't read.
The compiler doesn't read, yeah. So that's something to note. So that way you can add little notes to yourself if you need to. And then also these little curly brackets are explaining what's in this kind of block thing, I guess. What he's trying to explain. So yeah, so what's in the two curly brackets is called like a block.
A block of code.
Block of code, yeah. And then yeah, with C#, you have a bunch of different keywords, symbols, and characters. So all these little things are. This one is a keyword, right? Or
correct.
Yeah.
Keyword.
Well,
let's talk about keywords. I mean, start from the very line 1, right? The very top.
Oh yeah. So the
using is a keyword.
Is a keyword.
And what's significant about keywords?
They are.
What are you not supposed to do with them?
What are you not supposed to do with them?
Yeah.
I don't know.
You're not supposed to do anything. You're not supposed to use them as your own method, class names, or variable names. That can trip up the compiler.
You're not supposed to use your own what?
So the keywords, you're not supposed to use them as your own variable names. Your method, you're not supposed to use them as your method names, and you're not supposed to use them as your class names.
Because it'll think that the compiler will try to go back to the top once you write it in the bottom kind of thing, right?
Let's experiment here. Go to the end of line 12 and press enter. And let's type in var space static.
It'd be lowercase, right?
Yep, lowercase equals 0. And then semicolon. Now that it's accepting it, it's not complaining about it, but I wonder if you try to run it, if it's going to complain. Let's open up a terminal and type in, what is it, .NET run.
Oh, I didn't save it.
Oh, yeah, you got to save it. What is it complaining about?
It's saying that the modifier static is not valid.
So you can't use a keyword. So if you go ahead and comment out line 13, save it and
run it again.
Yeah. You just do up arrow.
Oh, hold on, I don't think I'm all the way down.
Oh, I think your window goes beyond your screen. So if you go ahead and restore the size of your window. So we're not displaying anything to the screen, but it ran. But yeah, so go ahead and close that bottom console window. So yeah, so you can't use keywords as part of your application. Those keywords really need to stay as keywords. So that's a key thing to understand.
Okay, and then yeah, just not using the key or yeah, there's like the whole language is based off of the keyword symbols and different types. So yeah, Visual Studio Code kind of reads those and compiles all of them.
Yeah, let's go through an anatomy of what you have here, because I think, understanding the different parts is important for when you communicate, right? Because it's kind of hard to like indicate it, like, well, yeah, the name main on line 7, we should rename that. That's kind of like long-winded, right? Where we just say, let's change the entry point to a different name, or let's change the variables in the entry point. So let's start at line 1. Line 1 are using statements. You're basically saying, hey, go and import these libraries, these assemblies, to run with my application because I'm going to need these. So these are references to libraries. that are available. Line 3 is the namespace, right? It's a way to keep your class unique. So most cases, namespaces would have like a company name, a department, the name of the application, and maybe the functionality. So that way you can have a big long namespace that's going to be unique, not just for the company, but in the public, if it ever gets released. The class is what actually is considered the blueprint that is going to be loaded into memory and executed. So that would be the class itself. And then anything inside the block of the class are going to be members of that class. So you have two methods that are members of that class. So you can, you have your main entry, which is a static void main. This is like the main entry of the application, and I'll let you talk about that a little bit more. But you also have that second member, which is a method that you created, and that in itself can be, you can put other code in there, and you can call it, from the main. Let's go ahead and put a console write line on that my first method.
And what am I putting?
Hello world.
Okay.
And let's go ahead and run that. Go ahead and open up the console app. I mean the terminal.
Too many characters in literal.
Yeah, so when you're doing strings, when you're doing a single character, you would do it inside single quotes. But when you're doing more than one character, now you got a string of characters, which is considered a string, right? And you have to use double quotes.
Okay. Try that again.
Let's try that again. Take 2.
Console does not contain a definition for write line.
Is it a capital L?
Oh, there we go.
So it ran. Remember, we're not writing anything to the console, but we have a method inside your method that you created that is writing out to the console, but it didn't reach it.
So what does that mean?
Oh, I love the question. That's awesome. Okay, so the entry is main. And so it starts at main and it goes through each one of those lines.
Oh, okay.
Now remember, the class called program is loaded into memory. And it says, I'm going to begin executing and I'm going to enter through the method called main. Executes main. Your method, my first method, is in memory, but isn't being called from the entry point. So if you just add a new line after line 13.
Okay.
And just type in my first method, open, close parenthesis, semicolon. That will call your method. So it starts at the main and it begins executing. It looks at line 9 and it says, that's a comment. I don't need to do anything with it. Looks at line 10. It says, let me assign the number 2 to team 1 goal. And it looks at line 11. It says, let me assign the value 3 to team 2 goal. And it looks at line 12 and it says, let me assign the sum of team 1 goal and team 2 goal to total goals. And then if you wouldn't have had line 14, it says, I'm done. Now you're calling my first method. It's like, oh, let me go call this method and see what's in there. And it'll begin executing, line 19. So let's go ahead and run this.
Okay. There it is.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. Now let's go through a little bit more of this anatomy, right? Let's look at the method itself. The method has a lot of parts to it. And it's important it would have made our conversation a little bit easier had I just told you, oh, add a console write line to the body of my first method. So the block between line 8 and line 15 of your main method is called the body of the method. So that way, as people are talking, is like, oh yeah, just add this to the body of the method or add it to the method. You know, they're talking about the block of code that makes up that method.
Okay.
So the method name is main, and the string array and then the args, that's considered a parameter. In other words, here's some arguments that you can take in and do things with it within your application so that you can pass in parameters, right? And void is the return type. It says, here's what I'm going to return. Void just means I'm not going to return anything. I'm just going to execute whatever's in the body of the method and I'm done. And then static just means that it's a standalone method. You just call it and it's going to execute. You don't have to go and put this into a variable and then execute it. And so I think it's in the next chapter, it starts covering some of this stuff, but I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the anatomy so that as we communicate, you start getting used to some of the language and some of the words that are being used. So I can say, oh, rename that class. Oh, go ahead.
This first part said something else that made it go on to the next one. It would just automatically go into the next one.
One more time.
So if this had like, I don't know the other keywords or anything. So if it had something that made it go on to the next one, it wouldn't just run this one and then end it. It would go on to the next one, or is that just like?
No, that wouldn't be the way it works. It's basically your namespace, your class, and then your method names. So let's say for example, let's use an analogy. I love analogies. The namespace is the plot of land. Okay, this includes the fencing, the yard, all the way up to the sidewalk, the big plot of land. The class only includes the house.
Okay.
And then the methods are the individual rooms of the house. So main happens to be the main entrance into the house. So that would be the living room, right? And then from there, there's a way to connect. You need a pathway to connect to the kitchen, to connect to the hallway, which connects to the bedroom. And so if you didn't have a hallway to go to the bedroom, there's no way for you to get to the bedroom. So there has to be a hallway, there has to be a door. And so the hallway or the door to your method called my first method is the main method. And that one calls my first method.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Cool. We'll leave it at that for now, because I think chapter 3 gets into this whole structure. And this is a very, very deep subject to dive into. But yeah, this is a good little sidebar conversation. I'll let you continue.
Yeah. So then for the next part, he kind of goes over the yeah, I guess we can just go into writing the or just understanding the vocabulary more by writing some of the verbs or methods.
Yeah, I like how he specifies that methods, other than main, methods are verbs. In other words, what does this method do? So in reality, my first method should have been called say hello to the world. So this isn't exactly a verb, but what's the definition of a verb? It's an action item, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's really what I'm trying to say, is that the name of a method should be some action that it's performing. And you can be descriptive. So it's perfectly okay to name a method, you know, something similar to say hello to the world. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. And here you have console write line, hello world. This serves two purposes. One is you're describing in the name of the method what the method is already doing. So you go into the method, you're like, oh yeah, this is saying hello to the world, you know? So yeah, I think main is an exception, but for the most part, you always want your method names to be verbs. I like the fact that his types, his fields, and his variables are nouns. So that was very cool for it to be pointed out that way. So if you look at your variable team 1 goal, right?
Yeah.
It's a noun. It's the goal, the number of goals that team 1 scored. So it's, you know, even though we gave it a little bit more description, it's not an action. It's something. It's a noun, so to speak. Now, if you want to keep your name shorter, then you want to be a little bit more precise, right? Like price, category, things like that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so,
yeah,
tax, you know, subtotal, grand total, those are now being a little bit more elaborate, but they're still considered nouns because it's something that you have. So yeah, I thought that was really cool when he pointed that out.
Yeah, and then are we gonna do the example that he does for each chapter?
No, I think we should stay away from those examples. People should get the book if they want to go through those examples. We'll come up with something alternative. Is there anything specific in one of the examples that he might have, that we can recreate on our own?
We can do storing text.
Oh yeah, that is a good one.
So for an example, we can do.
So the storing text, right? that one's actually really good to go over. And I think I even have, yeah, I don't have anything on that, but let's do the example and let me guide you through it.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and get rid of lines 14 all the way up to the beginning to 9. Let's go ahead and get rid of those. And so what we want to do is we want to specify a string. And so let's go ahead and do like var s equals, and then inside of double quotes, you can say, my name is Jonathan. This basically assigns the string, my name is Jonathan, to the variable s, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a way within the strings itself. Oh, so on line, create a new line after line 9 and do a console write line s. And then let's go ahead and execute that. In between my and name, let's go ahead and put a \t.
Oh, this is the backslash, right?
Yep. All right. And then in between name and is, put in \r\n. So these are what they call escape characters. So let's go ahead and run this, save it and run it.
Okay.
and we'll see what it produces as far as the output. So you can see where, you know, the difference between the first time you ran it and now the second time. A T represents a tab. And then an R and the N represent a new line and a carriage return. I think it's actually backwards. I think it's actually /N/R. But regardless, it doesn't matter because normally you wouldn't program like this. My point being is that when you're programming, you have to be aware of the escape characters, and putting a backslash in there automatically tells the compiler the next letter is an escape character. It's a special instruction. In this case, the T would be a tab. Mm-hmm. And then in the next case, it would be carriage return and a new line. And so if we were to put double backslashes on there, let's go ahead and do a double backslash.
For the T?
For all of them.
Okay.
All right, and then let's go ahead and run it. But this time, when you run it, I want you to type in .NET watch run. This is another neat little trick.
Oh, we're watching it.
So now you'll notice that it actually included the /T, the /R, and the /N. So what this tells the compiler is, hey, this escape character is not really an escape character. I actually do want you to include it as part of the string, the /T, the /R, and the /N. Okay. Now, the reason this is important, especially for Windows development, is that if you're going to include a path saved, for example, to open up a file, in Windows, it's a /. In Linux and in Mac, it's a /, and a / just shows up as a regular character. So when you're doing any type of path like C:\\, you actually have to include // so that the compiler doesn't say, oh, you have an escape character, let me execute the escape character. So you actually have to do the double / for Windows development. Okay, now let's go ahead and remove all the /T, /R, /N. Go ahead and get rid of those. And then let's go ahead and create a variable after line 8. Create a new line. Oh, no, you could have left that console open.
Oh.
Yeah, leave it open. I want you to see what that watch is doing.
Okay.
Did you save your program?
Yeah, I saved it.
So look what it did.
Mm-hmm.
It ran it again.
Cool. Yeah, it's back to normal.
Because what we're doing is with the .NET watch run, you're actually watching for those changes. So as soon as you make that change and you save it, the watch is keeping an eye on that file. It's like, oh, let me recompile because something's changed. So now what I want to do is I want to go ahead and include a new line after line 8 and call it var person name. Good job. Look at you already catching up with the camel casing. And put Jonathan inside of double quotes. Double quotes.
Oh, double quotes. I don't need the parentheses.
No. And then let's get rid of Jonathan on line 10.
Okay. Or just Jonathan?
Yep.
Oh, just Jonathan.
And then go ahead and put a space after is. And then after the double quote, put plus person name. So now this is performing arithmetic on strings. And it doesn't really perform the arithmetic. It just basically concatenates them. So go ahead and save this, and you'll see down at the bottom the output. So you can use arithmetic to concatenate string values and put them together. Now, this is kind of like, looks kind of clunky. There's actually a better way to do this. And I think I covered it later in the chapter, but we'll go ahead and cover it now. Let's go ahead and get rid of the plus person name. And inside the double quote after is, open and close a curly brace. And then type in person name. And then in the very beginning of the string, after the equal, in between the equal and the double quote, put in a $sign.
Okay.
Is it a $sign? Go ahead and save that. Yep.
Yeah.
So what we did earlier, which is using arithmetic to concatenate string, is called string concatenation. But as programmers were putting stuff together, like all those plus signs were just, it was getting too confusing. So instead, what they came up with is some syntactical sugar, which takes string concatenation and converts it to string interpolation. So that $sign instructs the compiler and says, hey, we have some variables in this string that you need to go find and put in this place. So it does it through string interpolation. And I think JavaScript has something similar to this, where I think they use the $sign in front of the curly brace instead of in front of the string itself. They use it like in between each one of the curly braces. They use a $sign. But you can see how you can mix, and it becomes a little bit more readable, right? A little bit neater. You know, you can go ahead and structure your string.
Looks like a regular sentence.
Looks like, yeah, a regular sentence, because all you're doing is just
arithmetic sentence.
Instead of arithmetic. Yeah, exactly. Now, why do you think they left the capability of concatenation in C#9?
Because that's how it used to be done before they put in the
interpolation.
Interpolation, yeah.
But why not just remove it?
Well, I feel like it's better to have those options to do however each way you want, but this way it makes it a lot shorter, and the people that are still using the other, or like for older apps and things that are like older, they're still able to read it, and or the compiler's still able to read it.
Yeah. And I think this is like something that a new developer would struggle with. It's like, why do we have more than one way of doing things, right? But really the reason is because you will break any existing code if you were to take that out. So anybody that started with C#1 and they have code that still runs all the way up to C#9 that they haven't have to change, it would break. So you can always put features into the language, but you can never take them out. So you can only add to it. And so that's really the main reason why the two options are there, is just that you can't remove it because of the existing code that's there. People have a bunch of legacy code, you know, they're not going to go and rewrite everything. They're just going to leave it. They're just going to move it over and compile it into new versions. And so you don't want to break whatever's there. And that's a concept that's really difficult for new developers to understand, is you can't take anything out. Once you put it in, that's it. It's there. It's it. Consider it concrete. You know, it's like you've cemented it in there.